Okay, we're the Guerrilla Girls. We are anonymous artists, activists who use disruptive headlines, outrageous visuals, and killer statistics to expose sexism, racism, and corruption in art, film, politics, and pop culture.
It's really great to be back in Athens. Athens was the site of one of our very first international exhibitions back in 2007, which was held at the Hellenic American Center. So we're so happy to be back again. I'm Frida Kahlo.
And I am Kata Kolwitz. Frida and I are founding members of the Guerrilla Girls, and we've been involved with just about everything the group has done from 1985 until today. We create political art that uses the persuasive strategies of advertising, shows people something they didn't know before, and has the power, we hope all the time, but certainly often, to change people's minds.
It's a tough time now, all over the world. Demagogues, fascists, white supremacists are on the rise. And then there's the pandemic, income inequality, extreme poverty, cataclysmic climate change, threats to democracy, and challenges to women's rights to reproductive freedom.
Okay, so we gotta start out tonight with one huge collective scream. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Ah!
Woo! Boy, does that sound great in an opera house.
Really good.
Okay, now just a little bit about what it's been like to be a Guerrilla Girl. Okay, imagine it's 1985. You're a woman artist, and you're pissed off because almost all the opportunities in the art world go to guys, white guys.
Imagine you go to a protest outside the Museum of Modern Art in New York after it opens an international survey of painting and sculpture, an exhibition in 1984 with 169 artists, but only 13 women and 8 artists of color. You see that no museum goer even cares.
So imagine you have an aha moment. You realize you have to find a better way, an in-your-face, unforgettable way to break through people's preconceptions and prove to them that the art system isn't a meritocracy where museums, galleries, critics, and art collectors always know best.
So you dream up a new kind of street poster to wake people up to the pathetically low number of women and artists of color shown in galleries and museums. You call a meeting, decide to be anonymous, and the group names itself Guerrilla Girls. You pass a hat around so we could collect enough money to pay for printing.
And within weeks, you're sneaking around New York in the middle of the night carrying stacks of posters and buckets of glue. And your work ignites a public argument about sexism and racism in the art world and beyond.
What follows? Hundreds of works, exhibitions, performances, workshops, and books, not just about the lack of gender and ethnic diversity in art, but also in film, politics, and pop culture.
And you get thousands and thousands of messages from people all over the world, ages 8 to 80, saying that your kind of crazy activism has become a model for them too.
Over 60 individuals become members of the Guerrilla Girls. Some stay for months, some for decades. A few just show up at a single meeting and never come again.
But in fact, we are cis, lesbian, transgender, diverse in age, sexual orientation, socioeconomic class, and from many ethnic backgrounds, Asian, South Asian, African American, Latinx, European, and so on. And each member takes the pseudonym of a dead woman artist to identify herself.
The Guerrilla Girls from our very beginning to today have fought against racism, sexism, corruption, income inequality, and sexual harassment and assault. Let's start with anti-racism.
This is one of our earliest street posters from 1986. Only 4 galleries in New York show black women, only one shows more than one. Not only did we point out racial bias, but also the problem of tokenism. The idea if you show one person from a marginalized group, you've solved the whole problem of discrimination.
This poster is a perfect example of how we craft our work, using in-your-face headlines, outrageous design, and killer statistics. And this one says, when racism and sexism are no longer fashionable, what will your art collection be worth? We try to twist an issue around and present it in a way that hasn't been seen before and is hopefully unforgettable.
Now, of course, today things are a little bit better, but if you consider the top auction price for art by a living woman artist, it's still only 14% of the top price paid for a living white male artist. And we look deeper at the top prices paid for work by living black women artists, that percentage dips down to a pathetic 5%. Who would tolerate that? Who should tolerate that?
Many years ago, a few decades ago, a bunch of women film directors asked us if we would do a billboard a few blocks from where the Oscars are held every year in Hollywood. And this is what we came up with. The anatomically correct Oscar, he's white and male, just like everyone who wins. As usual, we backed up our disruptive headline with a whole bunch of statistics. And you can see on your screen how low those statistics were for women and artists of color.
And we do want to tell you that it's okay to laugh at this bad news. Laughing is okay. Humor sets us free. We updated our Oscar billboard in Minneapolis in 2016 during the Oscars So White protests. And as you can see from the statistics, things have not gotten very much better.
So recently, we were working on a poster about, in the United States, the US has special commemorative months where different marginalized groups are supposedly celebrated. Yeah, celebrated, okay. So we had a hard time trying to fit the word discrimination into a certain size poster, and a light bulb went up right in our brains.
Discrimination contains the word nation. How perfect for what we were trying to achieve. And now we're happy to say that our project has become a video billboard on the famed Sunset Strip in Hollywood.
So here it is, doing its thing as a digital billboard. It's been up, it was up for almost 2 years. Our newest anti-racism project is a billboard about prison injustice in English and Spanish all over Miami. Just show you, and here's the Spanish. Sorry, I was a little slow with that.
Okay, anti-sexism. We formed originally to do street posters about the dire situation of women and artists of color in the New York art world and beyond. First, we went after artists, then we went after museums, and then galleries and collectors, all of whom participated in a rigged system.
But soon, the word on the street was, the Guerrilla Girls are so negative, so we decided we had to do a positive poster to make women artists feel better.
Okay, let's see if they laugh now. The advantages of being a woman artist.
Working without the pressure of success.
Being reassured that whatever kind of art you make, it will be labeled feminine.
Seeing your ideas live on in the work of others.
Being included in revised versions of art history.
Not having to undergo the embarrassment of being called a genius.
Now, this poster was an immediate sensation, and we're still getting letters from people all over the world in all kinds of professions telling us that this poster isn't just about the art world, it's the story of their lives too.
And no wonder it's been translated into over 20 languages around the world. And of course, here's advantages in Greek.
Here's the Greek version we did in 2017 for the Athens show, which was curated by the wonderful Artemis Potonianou, who also helped us send a message to Greek art collectors at the entrance of the Art Athena Art Fair. And here it reads, "Dear art collector, it has come to our attention that your collection, like most, does not contain enough art by women. We know that you feel terrible about this and will rectify the situation immediately. All our love, Guerrilla Girls."
Our interventions appear all over the world, and this is our very latest work, a huge banner on the facade of the Art and Design Museum in Hamburg, Germany.
You know, we always try to find a surprising way to get people to think about an issue, and we did some research and discovered that Hamburg has a very special pastry called the Franzbrochen. So,
I'm sorry. I thought you were continuing. Sorry about that. So we decided to use that pastry, put it on a marble plate, and carve a little crumb out of it, and represent the museum's collection with the 400,000 works and 1.5% women. That's the crumb.
Here's the March for Women's Lives from 1992. It's an example of how we look for a new way about a foundational issue. Back in 1992, we carried this poster in Washington, D.C., which says, "Guerrilla Girls demand a return to traditional values on abortion."
You gonna read the bottom?
But other marchers did a double take when they saw the headline. But when they read the fine print, they learned that abortions were legal in the United States until late in the 19th century. So for Guerrilla Girls, our traditional value is reproductive choice.
Today, religious zealots on the US Supreme Court have taken away a woman's right to make her own decisions, endangering the lives of girls, women, and the doctors and nurses who care for them.
So we decided to investigate the 5 justices, 4 men and 1 woman, who stripped away the abortion rights of American women. And here they are.
And we'll read one of them to you, but you can see this on our website and read all the horrible things these people have done.
It's in the show, too. It's in the show upstairs.
What?
The whole poster's in the show upstairs.
Oh, yeah, that's right. It's upstairs, yeah. Okay, fantastic. Justice Samuel Alito, who claims women's rights derive from the 13th century, a time when women were kept illiterate, were burned at the stake when outspoken, could be legally beaten and raped by their husbands, and oh yeah, the earth was flat.
Okay, on to museum corruption and income inequality, which in our eyes sometimes coincide. We love art and artists, but let's face it, the art system sucks.
Of course, there are collectors, curators, and museums who advocate for a different art world and collect all kinds of works by diverse artists. But the art world is also filled with poseurs, snobs, gamblers, antiquity smugglers, tax dodgers, insider traders, and even criminals.
And the art market is completely unregulated. In fact, it has been described as the fourth largest black market in the world, and that's after drugs, guns, and human trafficking. What a list.
So we did our first code of ethics for U.S. art museums in 1990. Most of the museum practices we complained about then are even worse now in the United States.
And we decided that we needed to update our code of ethics for art museums in 2019. And we pictured it as taking the form of a monument in front of New York City museums. But we also dreamed of making a gigantic portable version of it, and last fall we were able to actually do that.
We constructed a 9-foot-high portable monument on wheels and dragged it around to 4 New York museums: the Met, the Museum of Modern Art, the Guggenheim, and the Whitney. A film crew followed us through this whole thing and recorded incredible conversations we had with museum goers, passersby, and a lot of kind of angry museum employees. And you'll be able to see the whole thing streaming online because it's a short film produced by U.S. Public TV.
And here are some of our updated code. And we decided that this had to be written in biblical language because it was such an important set of commandments. If thou exhibiteth super expensive art, bought at super fancy galleries, and donated by super rich collectors for super big tax deductions, thou must rename it thyself the Museum of Super Rich People's Art.
Thou shalt cast out institutional racism, sexism, classism, ableism, homophobia, transphobia, and while you're at it, colonialism too.
Thou shalt banish board members who make the world a worse place. Out with money launderers, arms dealers, insider traders, climate change deniers, polluters, antiquity smugglers, addictive drug manufacturers, student loan sharks, and associates of Jeffrey Epstein. These were all people who were on the board of major New York City museums.
And if thou dost not show art or hire staff as diverse as the culture you claimeth to represent, admit thou art not showing the history of art.
Thou art telling the history and the story of wealth and power. We look at it this way. If in the United States, we're the wealthiest country in the world, if we are stuck with a system where the only way to fund culture is through philanthropy from the super rich, then maybe U.S. museums should only accept money from super rich people who make the world a better, not a worse place.
So here are some versions of our Wealth and Power poster all over the world, including Thailand, Kochi, India, and streets in LA, and on and on and on and on. And we also have a Portuguese version, which is at the Museum of Art Sao Paulo right now in this incredible installation they have on their top floor.
We are very fortunate now to do interventions inside museums to try to change them from the inside out, but we still love the street best. And here's a street campaign that we did in 2015 for our 30th birthday about art world income inequality, including a stealth projection, uninvited, on the facade of the Whitney Museum.
So the world of artists is great, but the art world sucks. The super rich are controlling the museums, sitting on the boards.
Power is being centralized into these few rich people. Like, it's really about the 1%.
Unfortunately, the art world right now appears to be about money and about the production of luxury items.
Billionaires are making more and more and more. And their taste controls which artists get the big bucks and get the opportunities and get the shows. We're planning to sneak around New York with the Illuminator. So we'll be starting out in Chelsea, and we hope to then go to the Whitney. So we have this idea to do something we could do really fast around New York and put these stickers up. Some of the stickers are about art galleries, about billionaires, billionaire collectors, and about museums.
Dancing in a strobe light, watching you in light. Dancing in a strobe.
So we wanted to put them up where they belong, on the big galleries, on the museums, and give them out to people, especially so they could do the same thing. And it seemed like a great idea. Call the people together, just put the word out, see who comes, and just run around the streets and put these things up and bother people.
It's going to be a Saturday in Chelsea. People walking around feeling really good about having seen all this inspiring art, and all of a sudden they're going to see the wall above start talking to them, and it's going to say, "Dear art collector, we completely get collecting art is so expensive. We really understand why you can't afford to pay all your employees a living wage." The wall is going to talk to them.
Every time we put something up, people would go bananas. Some people would love it, some people would hate it. So we would sort of work in that space. It's really very productive to provoke people to think about things. And we discovered early on that if you could make someone who disagreed with you laugh, you had a hook inside their brain. Once you were in there, you just might be able to change their minds about things.
Art in the age of Me Too. Lots of male artists have exploited and abused women in their real lives. And today, many abuse survivors are bravely speaking out. We say to have a deeper understanding of art in our culture, we must look at art and artists straight on. In the age of Me Too, there's no going back.
What do art historians call the macho, hetero, predominantly white male perspective in European and American art that depicts women as sexual objects for the pleasure of male viewers? The male gaze. But the Guerrilla Girls call it the male graze. There are lots of naked women in post-colonial Western art. Sleeping in the backyard, splayed out on beds, lounging around with their friends, bathing, dancing, hooking up, being harassed, abducted, bound, raped, and murdered. When we looked into how some revered male artists used and abused women in their real lives, we saw more than gazing. We saw grazing. So the question we want to ask is, does life imitate art, or art imitate life? Gauguin abandoned his wife and 5 children to become primitive in the Caribbean and South Pacific. He married a succession of teenage girls as young as 13. He died of syphilis at 55 and probably gave it to many of them. European colonialism at its finest. Of the women who had long-term relationships with Picasso, 2 died by suicide, 2 had nervous breakdowns, and 1 escaped and wrote about it. In 1950, sculptor Dorothy Daner decided her husband, sculptor David Smith, had hit her once too often. She loaded her pickup truck and took off for New York to start a career of her own. Smith turned around and married one of his young students. According to the book 9th Street Women, Hans Hofmann's summer school in Provincetown was a harem, and Hoffman, the bull elephant, who patted his female students on the ass and fucked everything that moved. Lucian Freud admitted to having 14 children by 6 different women. He may have fathered twice as many. He said women go downhill at the age of 16. Sir Lawrence Gowan, principal of the slave school, pimped for Freud, admitting young girls to the art school who had caught Freud's eye. Chuck Close invited his female students from Yale to his studio to sit for portraits. The ones who refused to undress were given $100 and told to leave. The ones who stayed endured prying questions about their sex lives while posing naked. Get ready for the male graze, the Guerrilla Girls' take on our culture's enduring love affair with bad male behavior in art.
This is actually a video that's part of a website that you can find. There's more information on it, themalegraze.com. You know, let's face it, sexual exploitation, domination, abuse, and voyeurism are everywhere in our culture. The Guerrilla Girls Male Graze project isn't about censoring artwork or condemning sexuality as immoral. It's about facing the fact that Western art has been obsessed with female bodies, sex, and violence. And unless we admit it, we're telling an incomplete story of art history and our culture.
Okay, helping museums write wall labels. Lots of museums now are discussing whether an artist's bad behavior should be disclosed in any explanation of his art. So we realized the museums needed us to help them figure it out.
So, to set the stage, here is the official portrait of former US President Bill Clinton that hangs in the US National Portrait Gallery in Washington. It just happens to be painted by Chuck Close, an artist who, like Clinton, was accused of sexual abuse. Now, what should a museum do about this very interesting coincidence? We have a few ideas.
3 ways to write a museum wall label when the artist is a sexual predator.
Number 1, don't mention it at all. Chuck Close is one of the most important artists of his generation and the creator of a new kind of portraiture consisting of patterns of color.
Number 2, mention it a little bit. Chuck Close is one of the most important artists of his generation and the creator of a new kind of portraiture consisting of patterns of color. Like many artists, he has had a few disgruntled models and employees.
Okay, number 3, be straight up honest. Chuck Close has had a huge career with prices to match. He has been accused of sexually abusing models and students he picks up at fancy art schools. How fitting and ironic that he painted the official portrait of Bill Clinton. The art world tolerates abuse because it believes art is above it all and that the rules don't apply to genius white male artists or white male politicians. Wrong.
We were invited some years ago to give the commencement address at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago in front of thousands of cheering people, students, and many very angry parents. Afterwards, we turned our speech, we call it our manifesto, into a video.
The Guerrilla Girls Guide to Behaving Badly, which you have to do most of the time in the world as we know it.
Be a loser. The world of art doesn't have to be an Olympics where a few win and everyone else is forgotten. The art market and its hyper-competitive celebrity culture makes everyone but the stars feel like failures. But there's another world out there that's not about raging egos, a world of artistic cooperation and collaboration. That's the one we joined, and we invite you to join it too. Let's make trouble together.
Be crazy. Political art or activism that points to something and says, this is bad, is just preaching to the converted. Instead, try to change people's minds and do it in some unforgettable way. A trick we learned is humor helps you fly under the radar. If you can get people who disagree with you to laugh at an issue, you have a hook right into their brain. Once there, you have a much better chance to convert them.
Be anonymous. Sometimes you gotta speak out publicly, but sometimes it works even better to speak out anonymously. Now this has its disadvantages, like working your whole life without getting any credit, but it has lots of advantages too. Our anonymity, for example, keeps the focus on the issues and away from our personalities. The mystery of who we might be draws lots of attention to the issues we promote. Plus, you won't believe what comes out of your mouth while wearing a gorilla mask.
Be an outsider. Even if you're working inside the system, we say act like an outsider. Seek out the understory, the subtext, the overlooked, and the downright unfair. Then, expose it. Jam your culture. Remake your institution.
Just do one thing. If it works, do another. If it doesn't, do another anyway. Don't be paralyzed if you don't get it right every time. Just keep chipping away. We promise that bit by bit, your efforts will add up to something effective.
Artists, don't make only expensive art that billionaire art collectors can afford. Curators, don't exhibit only the expensive art your trustees donate. Let's have more cheap art that everyone can own, like books, zines, music, and movies, like our posters.
Show museums tough love. It's unethical that wealthy art collectors who invest lots of money in art can become museum trustees overseeing institutions that in turn validate their investments. It's a lousy way to write and preserve our history.
Demand ethical standards inside museums. No more conflicts of interest or insider trading. No more cookie-cutter collections of art that cost the most. Convince art collectors their collections are inferior with only work by white male artists. Don't let museums perpetuate this version of art and power with a few tokens thrown in. Make sure your favorite museum casts a wider net and collects the whole story of our culture.
Whether you work in a museum or a classroom, don't teach an art history constructed by corrupt institutions. Do like we did. Write your own.
Complain, complain, complain. Be a creative complainer. Be a professional complainer. Don't assume people know what's missing from museums. Remind them how many modern and contemporary art collections still contain less than 15% females and artists of color.
Use the F word, feminism. We think it's crazy that so many people who believe in the tenets of feminism are still afraid to call themselves feminists. Feminism doesn't get the respect it deserves. Women's rights, civil rights, lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender rights, and Black Lives Matter are the great human rights movements of our time.
Feminists like us who believe in intersectionality fight for all human rights. No one is free until everyone is free.
Feminism is changing the world. It's revolutionizing human thought, giving many people lives their great-grandparents could never have imagined. But there's still so much work to do. There are so many countries worldwide where LGBTQ people and women have little or no human rights.
90% of transgender employees have faced discrimination or harassment at work. In the U.S., no federal law protects them, even though nearly 80% of voters support such a law. Then there's rampant sexism in the tech industry, including the harassment of female gamers. And what about the gender earning gap that the U.S. Congress refuses to move against?
Violence and abuse against women, gay, and transgender people is still a huge international problem. From gang rape in India to kidnappings in Nigeria to sexual slavery by ISIS to the negligible punishment given out for domestic violence in America. Trans women are assaulted and even murdered in the U.S.
But despite all this bad news, feminist resistance movements are exploding all over the world. Let's make the F word feminism the F word for the future. Let's all join together with feminists on the right side of history.
Okay, well, it's kind of interesting. We challenge you to go to the museum here, the Contemporary Art Museum, and do that kind of count that we do and see what comes up. To sort of round out the evening, here's a recent billboard that we did in Tasmania that I believe is still up, about another global challenge, which is climate change denial. Despite the fact that the oceans around Tasmania are warming at 2 to 3 times the global rate, and the majority of Australian citizens believe that climate change is real and must be stopped, the Australian government is still throwing money at the fossil fuel industry. We were very pleased to be asked to do this project, and we want to leave this with you tonight to sort of stick in your mind about how.
The Guerrilla Girls promise to keep making trouble in the art world, and we know all of you, and the world, and we know all of you are doing that too. Creative complaining works. Any questions?
Now it's your turn, and we have door prizes for people who ask questions.
Can't hear you.
Can you hear me now? Yeah. We'll have a short Q&A, so whoever would like to ask a question can just put your hand up, and people will be bringing you a microphone.
And take your banana.
That's what I get, a banana?
Yes, they're door prizes. It's
Everyone
a magic
asks a
banana.
question gets a banana.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So my question is, has anyone or any of the galleries, any of the museums that you criticized invited you to the table to have a discussion and to learn and to improve?
That's a really good question, because they don't invite us to a table to talk about what we think, but they do invite us to do interventions right inside their museums. And we've done, just in the last year, we've done this kind of stuff at 30 to 40 museums around the world. So I guess they don't want to talk to us necessarily, but they are hearing the message, and they are willing, in some cases, not all cases, to have our critique of them right inside their own space.
But just to make it clear, we don't really live in the art market the way most other artists do. We sell posters and T-shirts and books, and we do talks, and we send out exhibitions. So we really have found and developed a new model for how artists can have an economic life without participating in the Olympics of the art market, which is about a few winners and many, many losers. We think that all artists are winners, and that all their work is significant, and that history must be written about all the voices in the culture, not just a few.
Thank you.
Get those bananas.
No question, I just wanted the banana.
What? Wait a minute, take
No,
that
I'm
banana
joking.
back.
I've got 2 questions, if that's all right. I'm kind of hoping
Yep.
about what the answer might be. But
Can we choose?
First of all, do you have any male identified people as part of Guerrilla Girls or as allies as well to the work you do? That's the number 1 question. And number 2 question, if you've ever been invited by an organization or a museum to do a talk, an activation, an installation, and you've turned that down because you felt like they're using you as through tokenism to promote or, I don't know, guerrilla girl wash what they're doing. So have you ever felt that way? Thank you.
So we've never had any male members, but we've had trans members, and we've had almost every kind of person in our group that you can imagine over our time, and everyone adds their own point of view, what they care about, to the issue. In terms of the other question,
I have an answer for that.
Go ahead,
yeah. You know, our latest book, The Art of Behaving Badly, was supposed to be published by Fiden Press. We had a contract with them. What a lot of people don't realize is that Fiden Press is owned by Leon Black, who is a major New York City hedge fund manager and also a close associate of Jeffrey Epstein. And when all of that came out, we canceled our book contract with Fiden. We had signed it, we were working on it, and we decided that that was too much taint for us to be connected to. So yes, we have.
And we speak up, you know. Okay. When we're in the museums, we consider what we do an intervention, even though it might be on the walls. It paints a different picture, so to speak, than what museums present usually.
But thank you.
Thanks so much for the talk and the banana. I am interested in some of the work that you do outside of the institutions, the guerrilla stuff, and I wondered what's the biggest amount of trouble you've got in, or are you masters of getting away with it?
Mistresses, thank you. Okay.
Sorry, yes.
What we do is we're truth tellers, and we tell truth to power. Nothing that we've done has done anything more than make people realize what's going on. We've done nothing that's illegal. We back up all of our accusations with information, and we're good, bad girls.
Hi. I want to ask you, what do you think was your greatest moment in all these years?
I didn't understand.
What was our greatest moment?
Our
you
what?
have our greatest moment.
Our greatest moment. Oh my God. Well, as creators of all these hundreds of projects, you know, we have to say we love them all. Some work better than others, maybe, but it's really hard to pick one. So the only way I can answer that is kind of a smart answer, smarty pants answer, which is the next one.
And actually, every one of us would have a different answer to that question, so it depends on how much time you would have to listen to them all.
Hi. My question is, did you go to schools or to art schools, for instance, l'École des Arts in France, to explain your point of view and to explain something which obviously it's not taught? This is one question. The second one is that you show Picasso, you show Gauguin, and I think that you put also Watteau. You put the private life of the artist in his art, or did you make a separation? Is this because they had problems with their wives or lovers, or because they have a bad behavior, that it changed something to the art? I'm thinking about Guernica of Picasso.
You know, we're not making any gross generalization about the reason for this. We're just saying it's part of history. And if you see women being acted upon in art, it would be curious to know if in fact women in the artists' lives were acted upon. You know, some were, some weren't. It's just part of history. It's part of understanding the relationship of artists' lives and living reality to what is presented to us as artwork.
Also, all art is part of its own time. Every one of those artists you mentioned grew up in a particular time with particular ideas and particular abilities, and also some persecution that they put on other people. So we say you cannot separate the art from the artist. Now, when you look at our wall label part, we're not saying you have to do that every minute of every day. But to do a retrospective, let's say, a big exhibition of an artist who has had sexual abuse problems, or someone like Carl Andre who murdered his wife and got away with it, I think you have to say that. And to me, whether it's a negative thing about an artist or a positive, the more you know about the period they worked in and what else was going on and what ideas were in the air that people responded to, each in their own way. There's so many great artists, the better. So put it all out there and let us know what's really going on instead of trying to hide the full picture.
You know, it's all part of the rich telling of our history, and in terms of literary biography, the lives of writers have always been, you know, considered in parallel to the content of their work. We're just saying that the art world shouldn't heroize artists constantly, that artists are complex and flawed, you know, people who are as influenced by culture as the rest of us. And now for Picasso, you brought up Guernica. I don't know whether any of you in the audience are familiar with the Australian comedian Hannah Gadsby, who actually is trained as an art historian. She, in fact, is curating an exhibition of Picasso's work at the Brooklyn Museum, and it's going to be extremely interesting, and it's going to be an entire new take on Picasso as the very complex and sometimes detestable person.
Some way in the back, if you can all
right
get there.
Here, there's a question here.
Just wait.
Yes.
My question was going to be, can I have a banana? But I've been given one. Is there any evidence that you know of that have any male artists ever actually put pressure on their curators and purchasers and agents as a result of your action? And the obverse is, have you ever had any actual hostility from male artists about what you're doing?
I don't understand that. Could you explain?
He was wondering if we know of any examples of male artists putting pressure on female curators. I wouldn't be surprised. You know, I think that that's their story to tell. And your other question was?
What I actually said was there any evidence of male artists putting pressure on their own agents and curators, not on female, to support you?
Well, we're looking for it. We're looking for it.
Okay, and the obvious was, have you had any hostility from male artists who feel threatened by what you're doing?
Oh, sure. Less so now than when we began. When we began, there was this idea that there was a universal standard by which all art was chosen, and we even had curators say that, you know, women and artists of color were not making art that was part of the important dialogue and discourse of contemporary art, which, you know, in retrospect is kind of incredible. I don't think they would say it now, but sure, I'm sure that there's lots of, we get hilarious and very angry hate mail, which, you know, early on we used to read at our gigs, and some of it was unbelievable.
You know, there's another part to that too, and we all know that. It's extremely difficult to be successful in terms of museums and money and payments and all that, shows and all that stuff. Artists devote their lives to their work, whether they never show it, some of them, whether they show it every minute, others. And we are, so everyone has experience, you know, there's no system where everyone rises to the top. So yeah, it might be a little harder now for a white male to have an exhibition in certain museums, but think of how it was unheard of, really, when we were growing up. These shifts happen all the time. I think the great thing is you cannot stop artists from doing their work, and whether they're recognized or not, we a lot of that work comes down to us in all kinds of different ways. And we wouldn't have a culture without the fact that against all odds, artists do make their work, and so much of it is just so incredible.
Thank you. One question at the back of the hall, then.
Hi. I would like to ask you, since you have taken action against so many issues, have you done anything regarding the inequality in technology, especially because technology and art are getting more and more intertwined nowadays?
Well, you know, we know the art world best because that's the world that we were trained in, and we would love to be a model for someone who knows the tech world better than we do to do just that. And we hope that if you're in the tech world, maybe you'll take some inspiration from what we're doing and realize that you have to speak up, and you have to be unafraid, and you have to be fearless.
And sometimes you can only do it anonymously. You know, we did choose that from the very beginning, and especially in the beginning, it really helped us. So we understand people who work in institutions, work in companies, etc., that it is really hard to speak up. And, you know, we hope that there are insidious ways, even if you can't go 100%, that you can do a little bit every day.
There was one question at the middle of around row 11, I think. Or something.
Oh, that's going to be a warm banana by the time you get it.
Yeah.
First of all, thank you for the banana. My question is more of a statement. I can detect a huge gap when it comes to art of indigenous people of America. And do you think that it's the time that we let them speak and raise up the voice? And do you think it is something that us, the next generation, should do?
Absolutely. We've just finished a project right now that's very critical of American landscape painting from the 19th century, because the painters idealized the land as though they were the first people who arrived there. And the project, you know, very quickly states that the land was stolen and that it was then pillaged and extracted of much of its resources, and a mess was left for everyone else. So yes, we are considering that, and it is an inevitable, it's an inevitable realization that we all have to come to. And I think what's also interesting is that we need to consider the role of artists in Native communities, because it's so different from our capitalistic idea that there are winners and losers in the art world and that artists compete against each other, where in fact in many Native communities there's actually a collective. They work for the community, within the community, and that it's just what they do. And we have a lot to learn from that. A lot of our art education is very Eurocentric, very pro-capitalist. Artists are educated to be irascible individuals who are jealous, who are competitive, who want, and also art collections are like that. So many art collectors want exactly the same artists as other rich art collectors. And that really presents a very impoverished history of our culture. The history of art should be expanding, not contracting.
Thank you. We can take two last questions. There was one, again, the same row, I think 11 over there.
Oh, another warm banana.
Good work.
Well, it's the banana brigade.
Αρχικά, συγγνώμη, θα κάνω την ερώτησή μου στα ελληνικά, ελπίζω να μεταφραστεί.
I can't hear that.
I'll be translating. Just give me a minute, please.
Αρχικά ήθελα να πω ένα μεγάλο συγχαρητήρια για την ορατότητα που προσφέρετε σε αυτά τα ζητήματα. Και επίσης ήθελα να ρωτήσω δύο πράγματα. Το πρώτο είναι πώς κάποιος γίνεται μέλος της ομάδας σας και με ποια κριτήρια. Και δεύτερον, γιατί επιλέξατε το Κέντρο Πολιτισμού Ίδρυμα Σταύρος Νιάρχος για να εμφανιστείτε και να μιλήσετε.
Yes. So a big thank you for being
Louder,
so open.
louder, please.
A big thank you for being so open with all the topics that you are interested in. Two questions. Are there any criteria based on which you select the members of the Guerrilla Girls? And how come did you opt to come to the SNFCC to present your work?
How did we come here today?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So we've had, our members have been very diverse in terms of the kind of art they do individually, but they've all been committed to these issues and committed to trying to, one poster at a time, you know, push the world forward and tell the truth about what's happening in culture, not letting other people do it. So no, there's no test. There was never any particular reason why people came in and went out. So we've had a very varied group. But our early members, we have some early members who aren't with us anymore, and they spent their whole lives as activists. And many of us are like that as well, and others not so much. So it's just been people, you know, trying to do something better.
But to add a little bit to that, what we do is a collective work, and it's something that's not easy. It's something, as I just said, artists are not educated to do. That's changing a little bit, but traditionally they were not educated to work in groups. So it's messy and it's complicated, and you can't work with everybody. There's some wonderful people who came into our group who just were on a different wavelength, or perhaps they couldn't tolerate endless collaboration. So I would say one criteria is someone who can work collectively in a group, who's able to allow decisions to be made in a group rather than individually. It's tough. It's not easy. I mean, sometimes you end up really angry with each other. Sometimes you're really happy. It's a mixed bag, and it's complicated. I mean, think of it. We've had 60 members in our group, and we've been around for 37 years. Can you imagine being married to 60 people for 37 years? Just about every kind of human interaction.
Well, we didn't have 60 people all at once. People came in and out. We've always been small at any one time. And your question about that is really part of the issue. There's no way we could all get together and come up with one work, all of us here tonight. But with a small group, you can strong-arm people and lock them in the closet and then do whatever you want.
There's one hand at the very end of this hall.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. My daughter is 12 and she's in Art High School, which is a public high school in Athens. And the school has too few boys. And I keep wondering, how is this related to the inversion that you describe that we see in the professional art world, and what we can do to challenge the stereotype that at least young boys are not interested or should not be interested in arts?
Even anime and video games, I mean, that's all art too. I'm surprised, does the school teach that? I can't hear.
They teach arts, theater, and dance.
Well, maybe they need to expand what they think of as art. You know, it's a whole world today of so many different kinds of art. Thank you. To think about it as, you know, a painting, which is great, no problem with paintings. That's not what a high school should be teaching. They should be teaching what's really going on right now. Whether that would bring more boys, I don't know, but I imagine that it will, since the digital world is so hugely important and so creative. It's art, you know, it has its horrors as well, but in terms of art, it's been an incredible explosion of art by anybody who can learn to do it and put it up there. And I personally really support that. You know, art about the few, the few. If a high school is teaching the few, I have a daughter, when she was in high school, and it was a great school in general, their idea of their art program was totally bereft. And a couple of us went in to discuss with the teachers. All they had learned was, you know, Michelangelo, Picasso, and of course, Van Gogh. In fact, my advice to any artist having a show, don't title your show your own name, have your own name and Van Gogh, and millions of people will come see it. So that's a good strategy.
But you do bring up the interesting contradiction that that almost in every part of the world, the majority of art students are women. But then if you go to museums and you go to contemporary art galleries, the majority of artists who have professional opportunities are male. So there's some disconnect there. You know, and go to museums and count the number of women artists, and I'm sure that it doesn't compare to the statistics in art schools. So, you know, rather than, you know, encouraging young boys to study art, I would empower the girls to, you know, not ask for permission to go out in the professional art world and demand that their work be seen.
One last question here.
Hi there. I was wondering, has anyone tried to unmask you? And if they had, what did you do?
You know, no one really cares who we are anymore.
I mean, well, we've been chased, but we've never been caught. So yes, there are many angry people, usually male, who come to some of our performances, exhibitions, etc., and tell us what they think of us. But we've never been in a huge amount of trouble, which many protesters do get in that kind of trouble. You know, we're in a rarefied world, I guess, and we're anonymous, and it makes it a little harder for them to find us.
It wouldn't be a very heroic act if someone, if someone outed us. You know, where would it get them?
Can we just say to end, to thank you all so much for coming, and make great art, change the world, push everything forward. That's what centuries of us have done, have to do, and especially now, where our lives are so challenged in so many ways all over the country. Step up, and all over the world, excuse me, step up and do every little thing you can to make change.
And if you want to linger over our work a little bit more, there's a lot of it up in the gallery of the museum. So please visit it there and visit our website, guerrillagirls.com. We always love to hear from you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Father. Thank you, Frida.